50 Cent was just putting that out there.
Yeah.
They trying to say that Big Meech was the one that told her to tell on Cuffy.
Big Meech just got put on blast, and the receipts are straight up wild. After 50 Cent dropped some paperwork hinting that Meech might have been snitching, the internet lost its mind. But where did all this dirt even come from? Well, it turns out 50's got some former BMF associates in his corner, spilling all the insider tea. But here's the catch, Big Meech isn't having any of it. Word on the street is he's gearing up to show 50 Cent exactly what it means to cross a real drug kingpin. This whole situation is messy with a capital M, so let's break it down. One thing about 50 is that he's got no chill when it comes to exposing folks, and he'll spend whatever it takes to get the job done. But he might want to pump the brakes this time, cause Big Meech ain't just some regular enemy. For those who don't know, Demetrius Flannery, better known as Big Meech, is the national leader of the Black Mafia family. Big Meech started off moving product in $50 bags back in the 1980s, teaming up with his younger brother, Terry Southwest T. Flannery. By the early 2000s, the two had leveled up, expanding their operation to a bunch of states: Michigan, Georgia, Florida, California, Louisiana, and more. With that kind of cash flowing, it didn't take long for the feds to start sniffing around. So, the brothers cooked up a plan and launched BMF Entertainment as a promo agency. A pretty slick front for laundering all that dirty money. The company did more than just wash cash though. They signed Blue Da Vinci, who dropped an album in 2005 called The World Is BMF's. But things took a turn for the worst in October 2003 when the feds caught up with Meech, slapping cuffs on him and swapping his designer fits for an orange jumpsuit. The streets were buzzing, and most folks started pointing fingers at Blue, claiming he was the snitch. After all, he seemed like the weakest link. Plus, he didn't get scooped up with the rest of the BMF crew. To make matters even messier, a year later, BMF's logistics boss, Dexter Sosa Hussey, came through with more drama, throwing shade at Blue and adding fuel to the fire. So here's the tea. Sosa was talking about that one time Blue pulled up in court and his lawyer hit the judge with a surprise twist. As Blue was stepping up, his lawyer goes, "Your Honor, I did leave one thing out. You had asked some of the other defendants whether or not they had cooperated. Mr. McKnight was one of the individuals who did attempt to cooperate. He was debriefed by the government, but basically he didn't know anything that was useful against the remaining defendants." This wasn't even some recent drama, it went down months ago. His lawyer even added, he would have liked to cooperate if he could, but unfortunately, he did not really have any useful information. So basically, Blue tried to snitch, but the feds thought he was useless. But now the real question is, how did the feds even get their hands on that info? Well, after his name got dragged through the mud, Blue decided he'd had enough. He took it upon himself to clear things up and point the finger at the real culprit. In a wild move, he leaked paperwork exposing Big Meech during an interview with Cap Capone News back in 2023. Talk about flipping the script, and that's how fans found out about Tammy Cowens. She's been Big Meech's business partner since 2008, and when Meech got locked up, Tammy kept holding it down, running errands and keeping in touch with him on the outside. For some reason, Meech decided to thank her by signing over his life rights, giving Tammy the power to sell his life story and cash in big time. And that's exactly what she did, linking up with 50 Cent, who became the co-producer of the BMF TV series that dropped in 2021. But here's where things get real messy. According to the paperwork that Blue leaked, Tammy wasn't just out here pushing Meech's story, she was also working with the feds on the low. In the documents, she's referred to as CS1, a confidential informant for DEA Atlanta back in 2009. She fed them info that helped crack a money laundering case, leading to the conviction of a dude named Terry White. Around that time, Tammy wasn't getting paid to spill the tea on criminals, but her help in putting Terry behind bars had the DEA thinking she could be useful for more. That's when her handler, Agent Harsh, started keeping her close. This whole situation is wild. Tammy was out here playing both sides like it was nothing. So Agent Harsh put Tammy, aka CS1, in for an award that would hook her up with a cut of the cash and property seized from Terry White. And for the record, Terry White wasn't just some small-time hustler, he was an Atlanta kingpin sitting on stacks. Thanks to Tammy's tip, the feds managed to snag the keys to his empire, and Tammy made sure to get a slice of that pie too. But here's the wild part. Tammy didn't become an informant for the money. Even the feds thought she was a strange snitch because, unlike most informants, she didn't have a criminal record, wasn't caught up in substance abuse, and wasn't trying to shave years off a prison sentence or dodge charges. Her motives had the feds straight up puzzled. Turns out Tammy was playing a different game altogether. She only flipped because she wanted to get back at Terry White. Word is, he used her to launder money behind her back. And Tammy wasn't about to be anyone's pawn without making some moves of her own. So this wasn't about cash or clout. Tammy was out here serving revenge cold, and she played her cards right. So why did Tammy keep snitching even after the feds locked up Terry White? Well, that part's about to make a lot more sense. Meanwhile, behind bars, Meech was cooking up a whole new scheme. He linked up with a dude named Fidel, a member of the cartel who owned a trucking company out in California. This guy wasn't new to the game either. He'd been investigated and arrested for suspected trafficking back in 2005 and 2009, but managed to dodge any convictions. Meech's plan was bold. He wanted to use Fidel's connections to keep the money flowing while he was still locked up. But there was one big problem. Meech's hands were tied behind those prison walls. That's where Tammy came into play. According to court documents, in September 2011, Meech reached out to Tammy, aka CS1, to help coordinate a delivery that Fidel would handle. Tammy didn't waste time. She got in touch with Fidel over the phone, with Fidel checking in like, "How's Meech holding up?" From there, Tammy started making moves, connecting Fidel to Meech's lifelong friend Dion Cuffey, also known as Gatling, another major player in the game. According to those same documents, Gatling was the boss of the Gatling Trafficking Organization, a crew known for moving all kinds of illegal substances to St. Louis. With Tammy in the middle, Meech was still pulling strings from behind bars. This whole setup was way deeper than anyone thought. From 2009 to 2014, Gatling's crew was running the streets of St. Louis, pushing product like it was nothing. Meech, Suarez, and Gatling had a whole operation planned out, moving substances across state lines. But what they didn't realize was that they had a snitch right in the middle. Tammy was feeding everything back to the feds. And sure enough, the feds made good use of Tammy's intel. On March 13th, 2014, they rolled up on Dion Cuffey, aka Gatling, and slapped the cuffs on him. He ended up getting hit with a 27-year sentence for trafficking charges plus the use of firearms in connection with dealing that led to someone's death. That's a heavy sentence, no doubt. But here's the twist that's got everybody talking. Meech didn't catch any charges for his part in the whole setup, and that's left folks asking one big question. How did Meech dodge an indictment when the feds clearly knew what was up? Well, the answer's wild. According to court documents, Tammy straight up denied that Meech was involved at all. During a hearing, she was asked about a specific part in paragraph 8 of the report that mentioned, CS1 told investigators that Demetrius Flannery coordinated substance distribution arrangements between the two, but Tammy denied every bit of it. So the feds had the scoop, but Tammy's testimony kept Meech's name clean, at least on paper. This whole situation's got layers on layers. When asked if Meech had arranged for Suarez to move multiple kilos of cocaine to Gatling in St. Louis, Tammy straight up said no. Not once, but every single time. She was sticking to her story, making sure Meech's name stayed out of it. But while Tammy might have kept Meech safe, the feds weren't buying her act anymore. In their eyes, she was done, straight up untrustworthy. And if that wasn't messy enough, here comes the real scandal. Tammy was hooking up with one of the DEA agents working the case. That little affair blew up the whole investigation, leaving the feds with egg on their face. Tammy was definitely playing with fire, and it was only a matter of time before it all came back to bite her. By March 2015, Tammy's world was already crumbling. She came across a suppression motion filed by Gatling's defense team that could blow her cover as CS1. When she realized what that meant, she was freaked out, and honestly, who could blame her? Gatling was no one to mess with. The dude was dangerous for real. Official records show that Gatling had bodies on his name. In 2010, he allegedly ordered the hit on Theist Howard, all because Howard made the fatal mistake of feeding law enforcement info about Gatling's brother's operation. Tammy was in way over her head and the walls were closing in fast. Gatling's rep for handling snitches was no joke. He even had a dude named Terrence Morgan taken out in 2013 just to keep him from talking to the feds about his operation. So if Gatling ever found out Tammy was the snitch, she would have been in serious danger. Freaked out, Tammy ran to the feds for protection, but they left her hanging. With no one to back her up, Tammy took matters into her own hands and went to visit Meech. But the man she'd been loyal to for years wasn't trying to help either. All Meech had to say was that he didn't want his name tied up in any of this mess. Clearly, he wasn't trying to end up on Gatling's hit list either. After that meeting flopped, Tammy switched up the whole play. She made it her mission to keep Meech's name out of the case completely. She even flipped the script on the DEA agent she was hooking up with, accusing him of being jealous of her connection with Meech. And Tammy wasn't stopping there. She pulled out the big guns, threatening to pass around an unsworn affidavit to everyone involved in the case, including the feds. That affidavit specifically called out statements in the wiretap paperwork that made it look like Meech was the one who set up the deal between Gatling and Suarez. Tammy was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, pulling strings and flipping the narrative to save herself and Meech. Tammy's unsworn affidavit tried to flip the whole story, suggesting that Agent Cromer only dragged Meech's name through the mud because he was jealous of Meech's connections. But despite all her efforts, things were about to fall apart for Tammy, big time. See, once Cuffy got locked up, it didn't take him long to figure out exactly who had snitched on him. Cuffy pushed for a Frank's hearing, which gave him the chance to cross-examine everyone who helped put him behind bars, from government agents to informants. And yeah, that included Tammy. She was about to be exposed and there was no way out. Then, in 2024, Blue did another interview with Cap Capone, but this time he had Cuffy calling in from prison to spill the tea himself. Cuffy didn't hold back at all. He claimed that the real reason Meech didn't get slapped with the sentence was because he used third-party cooperation to keep himself out of prison. And it wasn't just Cuffy talking. His own daughter backed up the claims, saying it was all facts. The craziest part? The paperwork is right there to prove everything Cuffy was saying. It's not just rumors. Turns out, back in 2011, Tammy was supposed to get some Hispanic players in the game to cooperate in exchange for not having to testify herself. The deal was that the DEA would just send them back to their countries instead of throwing them in US prisons. This whole situation is looking grim for Tammy. Seems like every move she made just keeps coming back to haunt her. But it turns out Tammy was way more worried about getting paid than anything else. When the DEA agent promised her a lot of money, Tammy didn't even let him finish. She cut him off, asking, "Can I get Demetrius Flannery's time cut?" The agent's response, "We can work that." That little exchange got folks side-eyeing the whole situation, making it hard to believe Tammy was out here making all these moves solo, especially with Meech willingly signing over his life rights to her. And let's be real, if you're rolling with a known snitch, people are gonna see you as a snitch by association. That's just how the game works. The timing of all this dirt getting dug up ain't random either. The only reason folks are tearing into this case now is because 50 Cent went and stirred the pot. When 50 talks, people listen, and he's been doing everything but chill, talking about dropping a tell-all expose that's supposed to air out everything about Meech being a snitch. So it's looking real messy for Big Meech right now. If what 50's saying has even a bit of truth to it, Meech's whole legacy might be on the line. The streets are buzzing with questions. Did Meech really turn rat? And what's the deal between him and Tammy now? Are they still partners, or is that a wrap? We gotta know what you think. How's this whole situation gonna play out for Big Meech in the long run? Drop your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned, cause this drama is far from over.